Everybody has to take purchase and sale. Everybody has to take code of ethics when you're a new realtor. What other classes are you taking that it can increase your knowledge and your skill set? Are you taking a negotiating class to be a better negotiator? That's not a required education piece. Are you going to conferences? Are you learning the basics of marketing? Are you starting podcasts and learning about those? It's about your professional development more than it is about the term education.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today at the Real Estate Mastery Podcast. This is your host, Rick Flynn, and I have a special guest with me today, Karene Loman, who is someone that I've known for several years now and has had a great influence in my life. And I actually had the opportunity to work with for a few years over at Keller Williams. And one thing that I appreciate about Karene is her care for people and doing things well in how she approaches life and business. And as I introduce her, I'll just give a quick little background. So she is the designated broker of Keller Williams over in Spokane as the managing broker, and then the designated broker over in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho for that brokerage with around 350 agents. So you have your work cut out for you just with that. I do. And you are an overachiever as well. So you also own your own real estate team, SOAR Real Estate. So we'll talk more about that. And then because you are an overachiever, you also have a substantial education that I'm sure has played a huge role in who you've become and what you do. So Karene, as we start, why don't you tell us a little bit about your educational background and who you are, and we'll keep going.
So thanks for having me here today. I'm excited. I've just always been a lifelong learner, and I believe in that we are who we are because of the places we go, the people we meet, and the books we read. And kind of along the line with the books, it just fell naturally into being a lifelong learner. So I have a bachelor's degree in organizational communications from Eastern Washington University. I have a master's degree in public relations, which also falls under the communications track at Eastern. And I've taken most of the classes towards my PhD in leadership studies at Gonzaga University with the emphasis in ministry and organizations.
Okay. So a lot of that really deals with people.
People.
Right?
People in business.
Yeah, people in business, which is exactly what you live within
yes.
in your realm of business. And so tell me about SOAR and that side of what you do in real estate, and how did you come up with that name? What does that portion of your world look like?
Yeah, so SOAR Homes, I've actually been selling real estate about 20 years, and I came from a marketing and advertising background, working around the United States with Fortune 500 companies, Nintendo, McDonald's, REI, AT&T Wireless. So when I got into real estate, I really understood the power of branding yourself. And my original company was Spokane House Hunter. And over the years, I expanded into Idaho. And Spokane just really wasn't working in my name. So I started thinking about what I wanted to rename my company. And I really wanted it to be a play off of eagles, because my favorite scripture is Isaiah 40:31. They shall soar on wings like eagles. And so that was partly where it came from. Also, Eastern Washington University is home of the Eagles. We have all the eagles out on Lake Coeur d'Alene. And then eagles are the symbol of America. And homeownership is the American dream. So I was really trying to play off of eagles. And one night, I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, SOAR. That's it. SOAR Homes. So that's where it came from.
That's awesome. I love that it's something where you put thought, time. It's a great, diverse approach to the whole area. I love that. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us about your background before real estate. I mean, you talk about, I'm sure some people are like, what, Nintendo or REI? What? So what's your story? And then how did you actually transition into the real estate side?
So I actually went to school at Eastern originally to be a teacher. And I taught kindergarten for 3 years. While I was in high school, they had kindergartners in my high school, and I was in there every afternoon for 3 years. And I loved that. But when I started taking the classes, I didn't love that. So that's how I ended up with a degree in communications. I spent most of my youth working at McDonald's off and on for about 10 years. Once I graduated with my first degree, I ended up with a job at a marketing and advertising agency. For those of us that are a little bit older, we remember the show Who's the Boss? And I always thought Angela's job as public relations sounded really cool. So that was what I wanted. I thought, well, that's what I'm going to do. So I ended up in marketing and advertising, did that for about 6 years. And then right after I came back from maternity leave, they had just finished paying for my master's degree. And then they went through a 46% reduction in workforce.
Oh, boy.
So I was in the first wave of layoffs. I was actually thankful to be in the first waves. And then I, just kind of took a look at what I wanted to do. And I had a really great friend. I think you know him, Chris Olney with
Oh, yeah.
Coldwell Banker Tomlinson, where we were both before. And I had worked with him off and on all those years at McDonald's, and he was now in real estate. And he said, well, why don't you get your real estate license and come work with me? So here I am 20 years later. And that's how I got here.
Oh, that's awesome. It's funny that in real estate, the diverse background, the different personality types, the different stories that lead into somehow a bunch of us got into real estate.
Yeah.
And that's, I think back to, Chris Only with you or Jonathan Bick with me, both at Coldwell Banker, where Jonathan was at the church I was working at the time, and I respected him and took him out to coffee and said, hey, Jonathan, tell me about real estate. Because, Bible degree, like not a lot of options. And he said the same thing. Hey, Rick, I've got an extra spot in my office. Why don't you just come work with me? And it was like, well, okay, let's give it a shot.
Yep.
And here we are. Okay, very good. One thing, Karene, that I've always appreciated about you and your business and how you interact with the agents that is you teach because it matters to you. And within that teaching, you've taught a lot around how to manage your business. You have education in that. You live that because numbers are the language of business. That's a line we both know. So could you walk us through a little bit what your world looks like in terms of how you structure and organize it? Because realtors, as you and I both know, and I fall more in this category, we're a bit of kind of the wild child, have fun. We want to work with people. Let's go find the deal. But sometimes our organizational life is a mess, which is really bad for what we do. So how do you run your business? And then we'll dive in some more depth with that.
Yeah. So I think what a lot of people don't understand is how much organization and detail actually goes into selling homes. A lot of times people get their real estate license and they think, oh, all my family and friends are just going to use me because I have my real estate license. Or this is easy. I love to show homes and I like to look at decor and those kinds of things. And that's so not real estate, right? So when I got into real estate, the first thing I realized was that I had to stay in touch with people. And one of the things that I knew from my advertising days was that most people don't remember you without hearing about you at least 6 times. So that's why when you see a commercial on TV, you have to see that commercial 6 times to actually remember it. Likewise, people forget about you after about 6 weeks. So I started off right away with a print newsletter.
Okay.
I sent out a print newsletter once a month. And I got tons of compliments on it. I had a section in there called Tales from the Twins, which was the most read part of it, despite all of the real estate information. It was the story about my twins. They grew up in the real estate industry with me. They were pretty young when I got into it. And so that was the first thing I realized was I had to stay in touch with people. But then there's also like managing the money that comes in and goes out every month. And how are you going to manage that? And what expenses do you have? So running your real estate career like an actual business. And that came from my background in retail, understanding of profit and loss. And then also my degrees help with that too, bachelor's.
So it's really, you're highlighting the people part of it and the business part of it.
Yeah.
And often realtors don't focus on that second piece.
Right.
Of that you aren't just a salesperson, you're actually a business owner.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the multiple touch situation, right, where you're like, hey, statistics show at least 6 times something needs to be in front of someone to know about it and have it somehow stick in their brain some. What does that look like in your world right now? So you at one point did a monthly newsletter. How do you stay in front of people so that they do remember you? Because as we also know, the average person knows 2 to 3 realtors, and then they go on Zillow and there's a billion, people to the right. You click on the paid advertisement, right? Like, oh, I'm going to use XYZ agent. So how do you actually, on a bigger scale, keep in front of past clients and then also bring in new clients to your business?
Yeah. So the paper newsletter has kind of gone to the wayside a little bit, but I still have a newsletter. It's just now electronic. I follow the MREA Millionaire Real Estate book, which talks about, originally was a 32 touch, now it's a 36 touch. And so I'm actually sending them 2 things a month. The first one is now my electronic newsletter. The second thing is the market statistics. What's happened in the last month? So they get 2 emails from me every month. That's 24 touches right off the bat. Pre-COVID, I was also doing 4 events annually, once a quarter. I would rent out the carousel. I would rent out the par 3 golf course, rented out the Garland Theater, and then just some other ones. And those have gotten a little bit harder since COVID. They're starting to bring those back. So that would be another 4 touches. And then with those came the phone calls, the quarterly phone calls to the people that are in my sphere of influence that I am around, that I'm inviting to those events. So calling them once a quarter as well.
Okay.
And then the other thing I do is I just send two snail mail things a year. And then usually it's like a Christmas card or a birthday card or an anniversary card, something I try to do that's very handwritten.
Okay.
And so I've been in touch with them 36 times throughout the year.
Yeah. Have you found over time, you said you've gone away from the hard copy going in the mail. Was that strategic in the sense of you noticed the return was a little bit less on it and digital was just the direction people are going? Like what caused you to kind of step away from that part of it?
To be honest, there was a point where I was in 3 car accidents in 6 months and life kind of fell apart.
Okay.
And I didn't do much of anything for about 1.5 years. And when I came back from that, I just went more digital instead of paper.
Yeah.
I have actually thought about bringing it back on paper recently.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the other things, I mean, it sounds like obviously with COVID, that's been a big dynamic in everybody's life. And so it's kind of that, okay, that portion of my business had to shut down where I did the quarterly big get-togethers, things of that sort. How did you then during that time manage your business in terms of staying in touch with people? Did you find that there was a slump? If so, how did you handle that? Where are you at now? Like, walk us through that journey of your business during that time.
Yeah. So it just meant that I was now making more phone calls, right? So instead of calling once a quarter, I was checking in every 8 weeks, making a phone call. And when COVID first happened, it was as simple as saying, hey, how are you doing? Like, I know this is tough times for everybody. I just want to make sure you're doing okay. Is there anything you need? I'm out and about all the time still because we were allowed to work as realtors. And do you need me to grab you toilet paper and drop it off at your doorstep?
If you could find it.
If you could find it, right? So I just made a lot more phone calls. The other thing I started doing, or I should say went back to doing that I had not done in a long time, was equity analysis.
Okay.
And so I would create an equity analysis for someone. I would send them a live link to it on the internet, which is super cool because when we print it out, it doesn't change. But when it's alive on the MLS, it updates it when it goes from active to pending to sold, so they could actually watch it. And then, so I would email that to them, and then I would follow up with a phone call and say, hey, did you see my email? Did you have any questions? Is this something that's of interest to you? I'd love to do this for you twice a year or once a year, whatever you'd like to see it.
So for those listening, equity analysis, essentially what you're saying is the value of the home. How much equity would you have in your home based on the current market value?
Yes.
So you're bringing value to the people because it's always, everyone wants to know,
right?
Hey, what's my house worth? I check, even though we know Zillow's the worst ever. If I'm feeling lazy and don't want to do my research on the real data, I'll just see how much my house has increased or decreased. In the last few months, it's been decreasing. So to have a professional say, hey, Rick, do you want me to do that for you? Absolutely. And then it just creates value. You're in front and center. And when you're offering to buy someone toilet paper when they're in lockdown, right? Like, why would anybody ever choose to go to a different realtor at that point?
I can't tell you how many trips I made to Costco to buy the big things so that I could just give them one of the individual ones.
I love that. And that just shows right there. I mean, for people listening, like there's two things I hear is one, you pivoted, you made adjustments, and ultimately it was out of care for people, knowing that when you care for people and you treat them right, you do what matters to them. Eventually, you're probably going to get some business out of that, knowing that that's not your main thrust, that it's you care. And now we're in a different season, right? Where at first it was sort of like, I remember at that point in time running Keller Williams, where it was like, okay, team, we're in lockdown before they allowed realtors to go back out. Like, how do we manage this? Because at first, most people, myself included, had that fear of like, well, ain't nobody buying houses for a while. Uh-oh. So that wasn't the case. It was a short-lived season, and then prices went crazy. The market's been insane the last few years like we've never seen before. And over the last few months, things have changed. Interest rates have gone up. Things have pivoted yet again. So instead of hunkering down, hiding like some did during COVID in business and in real life, no judgment there. You figured out how to manage it and grow through it. Now we're in a different chapter again. So how have you now pivoted your business to a market that's slowing, prices that are reducing? How do you navigate that with your clients?
For me, it's still kind of business as usual.
Okay.
And I know that sounds funny, but that 36 touch stays the same for me. It doesn't matter if we're brand new in the business back in 2003 when I first got into it, or if we're in the crash of 2009, 2010, or we're in the craziness of COVID the last 2 years, that 36 touch is instrumental in my business. And like I said, there was actually a time where I didn't do anything for a year and a half. I quit the 36 touch. I quit everything. And within like 40 days, 45 days of actually starting it up again, my business was right back where it had been before. Same thing with this shift in the market. Those that have been around, that has the systems and the models in place and are running their real estate career like a business aren't really noticing a difference.
Yeah. So what you're saying is consistency has played a huge role. You know it works. You might adjust within that context, and yet you're staying consistent with that 36 touch. I love that. Okay. So what are there other certain things in your business systematically that you would say this has allowed me to succeed at a high level?
Yeah, definitely having a CRM, customer relationship marketing program that you use. You know, everybody says, well, what's the best one? The best one is the one you're actually going to use, right? So every day I can go into it and I can see, oh, I haven't talked to Rick in 6 months. I need to give Rick a call.
And it's going to automatically let you know it's been 6 months. You don't have to fish that out.
I can actually set it up to tell me that, yes. And I could put my notes in there. What did we talk about last time? And maybe you're like, oh, my twins are starting junior high or whatever, or they're going away to summer camp. So when I call you this time, I can say, how did the twins enjoy summer camp? Or how was junior high treating them? I have those notes. And so every day I come in and I log into that and I can see who I need to call, who I last talked to, and just look up all of that information and be ready to do that.
Yeah. So it sounds, again, like you have a system in place that's creating the opportunity for you to be relationally connected people to bring value.
Yep.
Because in our world, how often with our social media, you know, where it's everyone's quote Facebook friends or Instagram, whatever, but we're not really in relational contact.
Right.
And so when you get a phone call 6 months ago, or, you know, from 6 months back where you can say, hey, you know what? I remember you talked about your kids going to summer camp. How was that? I've been thinking about it, thinking about you guys. So I just want to check in. Like, when does that ever happen?
Yeah.
Right. So I would imagine there's probably been quite a few times where people are like, wow, Karene, thanks for calling.
Well, and I love to get the kids involved too, right? So I have these clients and their son was played Little League, and his team went to the Washington State Little League Championship, and they won. And this was in the newspaper. I saw a clipping of it. And so Caleb was his name. I sent him a little card in the mail, said, hey, great job. So excited for your team. Congratulations. And I sent a little like Baskin and Robbins gift card, $10 gift card, right? And I said, oh, by the way, you have to share this with your little brother, with Gabriel. And they remember that. Like Caleb's now at the age where he's buying his first home. And who did he call? He called me, right? Because he remembers that card.
Right.
So,
which is so cool about this business, that you really are impacting lives if you do things in the right way. Real Estate Mastery family, thank you so much for joining us today. I wanted to quickly bring to your attention one of the biggest pain points in the investment and real estate community, and that is roofs that go bad. What can happen, of course, is if you get a leak through a roof, it can destroy the entire interior of your home. If you're having a real estate transaction and a roof comes up in a home inspection and the buyer says, hey, we want a new roof, and by the way, that's going to cost $30,000. Or if you're a long-term investor and you have a property that has a roof replacement, that can wipe out years of profitability. And so we've decided to partner with a company called Roofmaxx, who actually specializes in extending the life of older asphalt shingle roofs to save you both time and money. And how it actually works is as simple as it's a bio oil they spray onto those shingles, it absorbs in, and it takes away that brittleness, extending the life of an asphalt roof on average between 6 to 8 years, and has a 5-year transferable warranty. So if you ever go to sell that property, it goes with that property at a fraction of the price of replacement, typically around 15%. So if you're interested, click the link in the description for your free evaluation today. Do you mind taking some time and sharing with us a little bit about that 1.5 year experience of being away? The question behind that question would be, we hit hard times in life, and then it's how do we push through? What do we grow? Right. How do we grow from that? So if you're comfortable going there
Sure.
as much as you'd like, could you tell us a bit about that and how you came through it?
So I was in 3 car accidents in 6 months, and none of them were my fault.
I really wanted to ask that question.
I was actually at a standstill in all 3 of them.
It's like the opposite of like, hey, you need to go buy a lottery ticket. It's like, hey, you need to just stay home for a while.
Yeah. And so, I had some injuries. I ended up having rotator surgery to repair my shoulder. Part of that was probably because I played sports all my life and I was a softball player. But, not having a seatbelt on the right shoulder and the impact, because they were all rear end impacts. So I had to have shoulder surgery. One of my clients was actually a counselor at the VA hospital. And I was telling her this one day, she actually was driving because I had a really small window to go show her house. And she was driving and we went past the scene of the 3rd accident. And I was kind of laughing and I was like, oh, this is where the 3rd one happened. And gosh, I was watching a movie the other night and just the sound of it, will send me into a panic attack. Mm. And my client actually said to me, you probably have PTSD. And I was like, oh, because I knew something was wrong, but I just didn't know what. And then we were coming back and a car turned in front of us, not even close to us. And I went into a panic attack.
Oh, boy.
And she's like, kind of laughing, not mean, but laughing like, oh, you're so PTSD. So I had to go get some help for that. I had to recover from the shoulder surgery. I also discovered in that process that I had a minor brain injury. If you didn't know me before, you don't really know that I have it. They used to say that based on all my education, my job experience, I operated at kind of a high superior level, and now I'm just average, which I think is really funny. So I just couldn't do anything. I couldn't get in the car. And I went to my managing broker at that time. Her name was Patty. And I said, I don't know if I can ever do this again. And can you work with me? Can you do some accountability meetings to get up and running in my systems again? And she said, you know what to do. You don't need accountability. And I'm like, I know, but I need something because this has been a really long process for me. And I just don't know if I can get into the car. So we worked through that. But also what came out at that time was the teaching that I still to this day love. The teaching aspect. I had taught college level classes at Eastern and Gonzaga. I had taught that kindergarten for 3 years. And so coming out of that was about the same time as the market crash and was kind of starting to take off again.
And you're talking back to 2008.
Yeah, but the car accidents were in 2007, 2008.
Okay.
And so by this time it was about 2009. And so I just, started working with her to get back into doing those things that I knew built my business. but also started a whole new trajectory of teaching and coaching and mentoring new agents with that.
Okay. That's okay. So you have 3 accidents, none your fault.
Nope.
All from a standstill. You have PTSD that someone from the VA who specializes in being able to diagnose that recognizes. You work through that, you grow through that experience. You have the humility to ask for accountability, and they know, like, what, Karene, you know what you're doing. And yet you recognize that you needed that. And then you go into the market during the biggest downturn that we've experienced in my lifetime, your lifetime. And then you succeeded there. And you recognize the opportunity for the education and that passion for you. So how did that transpire? How did you then go from out of the business to succeeding in a really down market and then teaching at the same time?
Yeah. So one of the things Patty asked me in that conversation is, what do you like to do? And I said, I love to teach. Like every time I turn around in my life, I get pulled back into that desire to teach. And it's what excites me every day. And so we developed an entire program around helping agents get back up and running, which was partly to help me get back up and running and partly to help the other agents that were coming out of that downturn at that time as well.
Okay. Now, you mentioned so there's education and you talked about accountability.
Uh-huh.
So there's a lot of people who know what to do. We all know what to do. Yet often we don't do what we know we need to do. And that accountability piece plays a big role. So for agents listening to this and they say, well, I know what I need. I know I should be doing my CRM. I know that 36 touch, or I know I need to be in touch with my clients. How have you gone? How are you accountable? Like, how do you make that happen? What's your experience with accountability been?
So, if you think about the teachers that you liked the most in school, or the coaches that you had, or if you were a musician, your music teacher, right? The people that brought out the best in you were the people that expected the most of you. And that's what accountability is, right? So accountability is me going to you, Rick, and saying, hey, Rick, I know what to do. I just can't bring myself to do it, right? It's like sitting on the couch all day watching movies when you know you should be putting the dishes away, washing the laundry, cleaning the house, those kinds of things. I just can't bring myself to do it. With accountability, you don't want to let somebody down. So if I come to you and I say, hey, Rick, I need to go to the gym 5 times this week. So 5 days, you're going to call me and you're going to say, hey, Karene, did you hit the gym? How was that today? How'd it go at the gym? And I know that you're going to expect me to have done that. And that's accountability. I do it not necessarily because I want to, but because I don't want to let you down.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? The self-sabotage that we often have, where internally we have these conversations where, imposter syndrome. I don't have what it takes. I can't do that. Oh, I should do that, but I don't. And then you get in this cycle. And yet when it's to have to tell someone else, like, I didn't do it, I'm really sorry. It really is a motivating factor.
Because when I didn't do it, I'm sorry. That I'm sorry means nothing.
Right. It was interesting. My one of my younger kids asked me the other day, who's your favorite teacher in school, Dad? And I was like, that's a great question, And it reminds me, I had to think just a moment, and it was my art teacher in high school that I had from my sophomore to junior year. And during that time, she pushed, and we would all have together in the classroom, we'd put our artwork up to view every week. Every Friday, we'd look at that artwork together, and we would critique, we would encourage, we would challenge each other. But she was the person who would give me the hard, Rick, what is that? I know you can do better. But she walked alongside me in that, and I ended up winning. I wouldn't even, whatever. I did well. And then my senior year, she had retired, and we got a new art teacher, and I didn't win a single competition. I didn't do anything, and it was my fault, but I didn't have someone to hold me accountable and kind of put my feet to the fire, not in a mean way, but in a I believe in you way, and I know what you're capable of, and I'm going to hold you to it. And I think often in our worlds, in different contexts, whether it's working out, whether it's in business, whether it's in family relationships, we lack that, but it's so important
Yeah. My son played baseball growing up, and he was on this one team, and we had this coach. His name was Jeff, and we were actually the third team he was coaching, so we kind of got the least of his time. So when he wasn't there, it was a couple of dads filling in, and they were great, but the difference in the level of play when Jeff was there versus when the dads were coaching was amazing. We didn't particularly win any games with the dads, but every game Jeff coached, we won. And it was the same team. It was just that different of, I'm going to play better for you than the other guy. And I don't even think it was a conscious decision. It's just the difference in that accountability to that coach.
Yeah. And that accountability, I just think also leadership too. I mean, as you share that, that like who we surround ourselves with, the classic, the 5 people you're around the most are the people that you're most like. I mean, that often is the case. And I just think about business and who do you surround yourself with? What does your leadership team look like? Who are even your clients that you work with? There's so many dynamics.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So education, let's get back to there.
Yeah.
So for those listening, like you said, lifelong learner, books, you had highlighted something at the very beginning. I remember you mentioned books and a couple other things, but just the idea of learning, how important is that to someone in business and particularly in real estate? To those agents who maybe are listening, who've gone to all the classes at the local real estate spot and they know all the contracts and blah, blah, blah. I don't need more education. What are they talking about? Why does education matter? And what do you mean by that?
So I think there's a distinction you need to make here. First of all, when you're saying education, you're talking about the lowest common denominator, right? You're talking about a math class or an English class. I prefer to think of it as professional development.
I like that.
And the difference between professional development and education is that professional development, you're bettering yourself. You're increasing your knowledge. Everybody has to take purchase and sale. Everybody has to take code of ethics when you're a new realtor. What other classes are you taking that it can increase your knowledge and your skill set? Are you taking a negotiating class to be a better negotiator? That's not a required education piece. Are you going to conferences? Are you learning the basics of marketing? Are you starting podcasts and learning about those? It's about your professional development more than it is about the term education.
That's great. So when you think of the different books you've listened to, the classes you've gone to, could you highlight a couple to us that really had an impact in your world?
Let's see. I loved The Go-Giver and The Traveler's Gift. Very easy reads. They talk a lot about how you take care of people comes back to you tenfold.
Okay.
Right? So those are just kind of feel-goodish type books. Another one I really loved was Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, who is a master negotiator for the FBI. And one of the things that he says in one of his podcasts is he talks about using random numbers when you're talking about ransom. And it makes people think that you've really thought about that number that you've thrown out there for an offer.
Right.
And I use that a lot, especially in this crazy market. And I can't tell you, I teach this all the time, and I think very few people have actually followed it. But everybody writes an offer for $300,000 or $600,000. And when we're doing increases, like I'll beat any offer by X amount, again, everybody uses round numbers. So I really became a steward of the Chris Voss theory of random numbers. And I would never write an offer for 300. I would write offers for 301, 200. And it helped me actually win a house when I was writing offers down in Utah for a house for my son to live in while he was at college. We actually got the one we got because I used a random number.
That's so cool.
I had a listing where I got 5 offers. 4 of the offers were identical. They were all $300,000 with escalation clauses up to $310,000, and we'd beat any other offer by $1,000. Had any one of those even gone 200 over the 300,000, they would have won.
Yeah. It's like simple data-driven points and mind wizardry combined. It's those little tricks that make all the difference.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
So that's one of my favorites. And then, I mean, if you're going to get into real estate, you have to read The Millionaire Real Estate Agent. And I also love the one thing, like 20% of our activity equals 80% of our business, right? 20% of the realtors do 80% of the business. The one thing is all about that. What's your 20%?
Yeah.
Where is your time best spent?
Yeah, that's such an interesting kind of back to the like mind wizardry tied in with data.
Yeah.
Pareto's principle.
Yep.
What was it that, I won't even get into it, but whoever's listening, you need to look at the 80-20 principle. It will blow your mind. Okay. You also mentioned, Karene, about, you're in the real estate game. You understand that industry and really as a wealth building tool, it's an incredible thing. And you talked about a little earlier with me, your property purchasing, kind of where your kids are at. And then you have another daughter who in her early 20s purchased a property and rented it out. So why don't you tell us about why? Well, let me back up. There's so many people in real estate who don't either own real estate or don't invest in real estate beyond just their personal dwelling, yet they help others do that all the time. So why should, I'm going to assume you think we should, as real estate people, invest in real estate ourselves? And how does that look in your personal life tied in with your kids?
Yeah. So I had an aunt and uncle who had a ton of rental properties, but they were all like crap properties. And I spent a lot of my childhood helping clean up those crap properties in the summer when their tenants would move out. I had one that I had to patch every hole in the wall from a BB gun and doors. It was horrible. And so in my mind, even though I'm in real estate, I don't want to be a landlord, right? Because that was my experience. So we have 4 kids. Our second daughter was actually working in the real estate industry, and she decided to buy her first home. I want to say she was 22, 23, maybe 24 at the time. So she bought her first home, and then a friend of mine from Seattle had called and said, "Hey, do you know anybody that has a room for rent? My friend's son is going to be going to GU, and he kind of needs to be close by." Well, the house she happened to have bought was by GU. So I said, "I actually might." So he ended up moving in with her, and then she finished off her basement and rented 2 more rooms. So she lived in this house that she bought for free. She had 3 roommates in a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house, and she lived there for free. And then she bought her second home, and then her third home, and her fourth home, right? So that was kind of a little bit of an eye-opener for me. So as our 2 younger children, our twins, they're 19 now, but my boy, he was going off to college at Utah, and his program is year-round, and they were expecting 1,800 incoming freshmen that year. They got 23. So the dorms were going to be a big issue. They didn't have enough dorms for all the kids. And I figured out that with a year-round program, if he did get into the dorms, it was going to be $60,000 for him to live in the dorms year-round for 4 years. So I realized, I started kind of looking at their real estate market down there, and I realized that $60,000 was a 20% down payment on a home. So why didn't I take that same $60,000 and buy a house? Then we rent out the rooms. And the first year we did that, we rented the 3 upstairs bedrooms. He stayed in the 2 bedrooms downstairs that were unfinished at the time, roughed in, but unfinished. And we just broke even. So the 3 bedrooms upstairs paid for the mortgage. He still lived for free.
Right.
The second year, we actually went in that summer, finished off the 2 bedrooms and the roughed-in bathroom downstairs, and now we're making a profit.
So instead of spending $60,000 that disappears over 4 years, you now own something that's making you money, providing a better opportunity for your son.
Yep. And so then his twin sister, she has been going to Eastern, so she's just been living with us, but I had an opportunity to buy one in the Perry district through one of my clients who agreed to carry the contract. We didn't, with tuition and everything, I didn't have 20% down at this point. And so we had, I think, about 10% down. So he agreed to carry the contract. My daughter doesn't have credit because she's 19 years old, right? And so he used what we did have as a down payment. He's carrying the contract, and it's a 4-bedroom, 3-bath in the Perry District by the University District, Gonzaga, WSU, EWU. And we're renting that one out. She's actually still living with us.
Okay.
And for the first year, we just rented that out to students. And on that one, because interest rates have gone up a little bit, we're just breaking even on that one. Actually, I think we're losing about $50 a month, but we're making a significant amount on the Utah property. So it ends up being a wash.
Yeah. Well, and long term as well, you're still paying something down. The market historically goes up. I mean, real estate, there's no more dirt being put onto the earth.
Yep.
And so long term, that's a great opportunity. And that's where I remember you sharing another time that your daughter so she's getting married, and then they're going to eventually move into that house. And
yeah, so what it's actually the perfect setup. The downstairs has its own entrance. And so we're going to close off the upstairs from the downstairs, and it's a 1-bedroom, 1-bath downstairs, family room, dining room, and we're going to take out the large storage room and put in a little kitchenette down there. And so they'll be able to live down there while her husband goes to school to get his nursing certificate. So they're probably be down there about 3 years. And then when he's done with that and he has a job, then they'll move upstairs and we'll rent out the basement.
Yeah. So there you go. I mean, long-term wise, there's a strategy and a plan, and you can't do that in the stock market. You just plop your money there. You might get some, returns.
I'm glad you actually mentioned the stock market, because I have a client. I just closed on a house that they came into a sum of money, and she is in investments for Bank of America. That's what she does. And she did not want to put her money in the stock market right now because she knows it. And so they actually took that money. They bought a little house on the South Hill. Not a great house, but it's a nice little house with a lot of upside potential. And their 25-year-old daughter is going to live in it.
Yeah, there you go. Real estate.
Yep.
Magical. Okay. Well, Karene, as we get ready to wrap this up, I like to ask the question around real estate stories. So it can be a touching story. It can be a, oh my goodness, I almost died story. You name it. But I know you have experience in this realm. And so is there a story that we could listen to from you that would just be like, wow, Karene, that's a story?
Probably one of my favorite stories, and not because it was necessarily a good story, but because
we're okay with that.
It's comical. So I had heard about a lake property coming on out on Deer Lake, and the gal that had cut my hair for years had talked about they were looking for some lake property that they could put their trailer on. They didn't care if it was primary, but they wanted a place for their boat. So I heard about this property. It was December. I called her and I said, hey, I heard about this. I don't know if you guys are interested, but I just thought I'd tell you. And she's like, yeah, actually we are. So on December 22nd, I know that because it was my birthday, in the middle of a really horrible snowstorm, we drove out to Deer Lake and looked at this little mobile home on this secondary lot and ended up writing an offer on it. Well, that was in December, and we didn't close until June 1st. And in the process of this, the seller had filed bankruptcy, but then her bankruptcy attorney had died.
Oh, that's fun.
There was a mobile home, and we couldn't take the mobile home off the land because they had built a structure over it. And yet there was no title to it, and it wasn't deeded to the land. So we had to spend a lot of time trying to find the title. And then both the seller and the buyer had parents die in the middle of all of this transaction.
Oh, boy.
So it was just a comical transaction, and it took us 6+ months to get it closed. But we closed just in time for them to enjoy it for the 4th of July, and they just sold it here a couple of years ago.
Okay.
So they had it for over 10 years.
Wow. So that just goes to highlight that for those of you out there who say realtors get paid way too much money for what they do. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I had to drive up and back and forth to Colville several times because this was in Stevens County to try and figure out the title of the trailer. And the bankruptcy attorney was up there. And
yeah, so you spent more on gas than your commission check. So
I did,
well
because
done.
This was like a $75,000 piece of land.
Oh, good story. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. So final question, is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't ask you that would be helpful for our audience?
I don't know that there's a particular question. What I would say for anyone considering getting into real estate is that you don't get into this business because you like looking at homes or because you like people.
What about all the HGTV shows?
I know, HGTV. You get into this business to run a business, to be an entrepreneur, and to have relationships.
Yeah. And what you highlight so well is that in order to make those relationships last, you need to see yourself as a business owner. And what I love too is it's that education versus growth mindset, right? Like you have to have a growth mindset because the industry changes.
Yes.
The market changes, people change. They're always the same though at the same time, but you have to be ready to push it to the highest level.
And your clients have to know that you have the knowledge, the skills, and the background to negotiate on their behalf.
Yep. Because they really, a friend is fine. I used to say when I was a youth pastor, leader first, friend second. Often the friend first thing would pop in. It's like, nope, you're a leader. You have to keep them accountable. You have to disciple them, essentially, was the word we would use, and be a friend in that process. But sometimes you just have to say the hard things, and you have to help someone climb that mountain to success. And so as realtors, sure, they want someone who's friendly and nice and knows their story, but ultimately they want to get the best deal possible, the house of their dreams, and you're the one who helps them get there.
And a lot of times, especially in the crazy market we're just coming out of, it's my relationship with those other realtors that helped my clients win some of those offers. I've built those relationships, and they know my clients are approved, they're ready to go, they're vetted. I'm not just out showing houses to show houses. Right. They know they can get a hold of me. They know I'm going to be responsive throughout the process. And they know that my clients are too. And that's huge in this business.
Yeah.
This is a relationship business.
And before we leave, Karene, I want to make sure that we let people know how they can best get a hold of you. So tell us what that would look like.
So you can check out our website, which has all of our contact information on it, soarhome.net. You can also give us a call at 509-795-1733.